A few years ago, the LSO was thinking about the centenary of World War I, and we realised that the orchestra had been 10 years old at the time war broke out, but we are the only surviving orchestra in London from that time, and therefore we should try to tell the story and look through our archives and find material.
Well, the LSO has quite an interesting archive. And with the centenary of the First World War coming up, we thought we'd start having a look to see what the LSO did, whether it continued, whether it stopped playing during the First World War, what its players did, how things back home affected the way they did concerts, maybe the repertoire and stuff like that. And we had quite an interesting time searching through the archive, and it often led to avenues which we weren't quite expecting, which has been one of the most fascinating things. And then we put out a call on social media, on Facebook and Twitter, and it's amazing what has come back through that, finding out what people have done, and realising that there's still a connection with the audience today and players as well.
I thought that it could be a great opportunity to commission a substantial work. We try to do one major work every year to complement the work that we do with our young composers. So I had in the back of my mind that that could be a great subject for a major musical commission.
Well, I was approached by Catherine at the LSO and asking me if I would be interested in working on a piece with text by Andrew Motion, who'd just brought out a book of poems about war. And this would be for the World War I commemorations in November. And so I went along to a meeting, thinking maybe that it would be like a short opener or 10-minute piece or something, and it became clear they were talking about the second half of a concert, and with everything, the full orchestra and chorus, and what soloists would I like, and I was just totally stunned. It wasn't what I was expecting at all, and it was obviously tremendously exciting. And then I was given the book of poems, Laurels and Donkeys by Sir Andrew Motion, and spent a long time sort of reading through it and wondering which one I might choose, or a selection, and settled on his poem An Equal Voice, which is it's almost a found poem. It's taken from quotations from soldiers who have returned from war and are psychologically damaged. So it's about shell shock and post-traumatic stress syndrome. And it's very dark, obviously, incredibly dark. And it goes through from the Somme right through to Afghanistan, and the same thing reoccurring through the generations, which just really brought home to me the sort of sense of futility and tragedy of war. And the reason it's called An Equal Voice, the poem, is because we hear a lot from the doctors and from the main movers in war, but we don't hear from the individual soldiers who've been damaged, and this is giving them a voice. This poem is giving them a voice.
My poem already existed. We met a few times and talked about it. I was very taken with her as a person, as I had already been taken with her as a musician. I was particularly pleased that they asked her to do it because I'd very much enjoyed her setting of the Ratushinskaya poems, which very cleverly and rather originally, I think, used spoken sound as well as sung sound. And I liked the ideas that began to emerge as we talked about what was really the elephant in the room early on, which was Benjamin Britten, which was the War Requiem. Now this, strictly speaking, the thing that Sunny's written, strictly speaking, is not a requiem. She prefers to think of it as an oratorio, and so it is. And she's scattered through it at various significant moments, quotations from the Song of Songs. So like the Britten piece, it has a kind of balance between more nearly contemporary stuff, the Owen poems, and something very ancient and more particularly, more specifically religious. So I can't wait to hear it.
I've been asked a couple of years ago when Catherine McDowell told me, will you be interested in taking this challenge to do a world premiere of a piece composed by Sally Beamish? And of course I heard the name of this composer, But my first reaction was, I would like to know more of her music. And when I listened to some of the pieces, immediately I answered back to Catherine McDowell, I'm happy to do it. The result, we are going to discover today for the first time, for the first day, is intriguing. What I could read in the score excited me a lot. So I'm very curious to see how does it sound.
I'm really looking forward to working with the LSO. I haven't worked with them before, and I haven't worked with Gianandrea Noseda before, so that's very, very exciting. And one of the soloists, Shuna Scott-Zendel, I worked with before, actually also on a piece about war, about Flodden, the Battle of Flodden, which was the single greatest loss of life before the Battle of the Somme, and that was in 1513, so it was a pretty devastating battle. And having heard her sing that, I knew I wanted her to do this one as well. And Marcus Farnsworth, who I haven't worked with before, but I've been to hear him sing. So both those voices I was absolutely writing for. I know how they sound, and that was tremendously exciting.
Sally and I met up in the summer, and just before, I think it was about June, and we sat and went through some of her ideas for the piece and her approach to the text, and then actually sat and a couple of months later sang through a few of those bits and bobs.
Approaching a new work for me involves an awful lot of studying the notes very carefully, because I don't have perfect pitch, so I have to plug them into my brain very hard, and I'm a terrible sight reader, so I can't even go, oh, it'll be fine, I'll look at it on the day and we'll be laughing. No, I have to study it terribly carefully, so it's quite an intricate process. I kind of build it up in layers, the notes, all the rhythms, getting the kind of key time signatures and everything into my brain, and then there's an element of trying to get some freedom into the piece.
Try to find the reason why the composer make the sequence of the notes. It's like a rebus, it's like an enigma. You have to try to find out the way the composer worked in composing it. With this piece, you can really see the craftsmanship. It's really well crafted, it's really well conceived. Vocal lines are very well written. The chorus part is very interesting also because it uses all the elements, all the possibilities the chorus can use, from the whispering, from this parlato, the speaking sound, till the loudest explosion, and also some, I don't know in English, onomatopoeia, just to, for instance, in a couple of places you have the impression to hear the explosion of the bombs, but made with a chorus.
The Battle of the Somme happened in beautiful countryside. Presumably there were birds, there were trees, and the kind of nightmare took place in that setting. But the pastoral that I've used is a sort of a very black landscape, really, and the bird song is twisted. And so some of the bird song is referring to a line in Andrew's poem which says, "A soft siffle like a distant lark." And of course it's the sound of the shells, that descending whistle that comes down, which does in a way sound quite bird-like. Actually, it was quite inspired by visiting my mother, who has dementia, in a care home, and hearing the different voices that go on, and there's a lot of repetition that there's one guy who just constantly says, "Cigarette, cigarette," and this is like a sort of counterpoint, and then someone else might be singing a little fragment from a half-remembered lullaby, and that's going on as well, very repeated. There's someone else grinding their teeth. There's all these different things juxtaposed, and that really inspired me, sitting in this environment and reading about the damage. And there's one man who constantly chants, "Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy," and there's someone who thinks he's Mahatma Gandhi, and there's someone who can't keep his legs still, and all these descriptions, and that's all gone into this scherzo. And I've used the voices of the choir in speech and shouting as well, and whispering as well as singing, and it becomes this sort of counterpoint of different repeated phrases, so quite obsessive, and this brings the piece to its absolute climax.
We've built a number of other events around this commission. There's a conference on the trauma of war in St Luke's on the day of the premiere, and we'll have members of the military speaking about their experiences of using music in a war situation, and also in using music to help people to recover from the trauma of war, to deal with things like shell shock and post-traumatic syndrome. Music has a really powerful role to play here, and it's fantastic to hear what some people are now doing in these situations in helping people to recover from their awful experiences. Then we've also got an opera in a day based around Sally Beamish's ideas and Andrew Motion's texts, and that will be taken here at St Luke's by Rachel Leach and by Tim Yelland. And they will be creating an opera on these themes with families, and people can sign up for that event. And then we have a concert a few days before given by the Guildhall students, again exploring this wider theme.